Okay, and now we will enter the regular scheduled business meeting of Region 12. I'll call that to order. We'll take attendance one more time. Ellen? Here. John? Here. Greg? Here. Michelle? Here. Jim? Yes. Stephanie? Jennifer? Here. Lisa and Michael are out. Julie? Here. Peter? Here. Thank you. Any comments on the agenda for the regularly scheduled business meeting? Seeing none, we'll move into reports and recognition. Actually, I don't have much to really add this evening. There's been a lot said regarding the budget. I will say this, that if the medical premiums was an unfortunate event that was certainly outside of our control, but putting that aside, we had otherwise produced a flat budget. So the net increase is really solely attributable to the medical premiums. And again, that was an unfortunate, run of, Bob, 14 years of managing those premiums to relatively flat, Bob, or? Yeah. We did change, I think the last teacher negotiation or so, the medical plans moved to a high deductible, which also helped control our costs. We're still midway through the existing teacher's contract, and the next time that contract comes up, benefits will again naturally be looked at, as they always are, and opportunities to see whether or not the district, especially with the state of Connecticut giving us the ability to pool more resources and do more sharing, may do something in the time between now and then that gives us the ability to pool our medical demands, perhaps with other school districts, maybe even across the state, which should give us more leverage, which should give us the ability to protect ourselves against the volatility that we have, because we're a very small district, and last year we had an unfortunate number of claims which drove our premium increase. So I think it's important that the board understands and sees that with clarity, as well as the general public. With that, Pat, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Just starting with personnel, we do have a resignation, Diana Dignan, at the front door. She has another position. We do have some great things going on in the spring. The Judy Black Memorial this Friday from 6 to 8. They have the grand opening of the Judea Garden 10-year anniversary, and we have our students' artwork there. So if you are available, please stop by, and that runs till the 28th. We also have 6 students whose artwork is on exhibition at Hunt Hill Farm, which was also the silo previously, and that is from April 14th to the 26th, so we're very excited about that. We have a lot of sporting events going on, and our spring concerts are going to be starting in the schools, so I hope everyone tries to take advantage of coming in and seeing some of the wonderful work that happens in the spring in our district. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, committee reports at advance. Michelle?
I have nothing to report since last month.
Michael is not here, so we'll move to Greg. Facilities.
The Facilities Committee will be meeting later in the month. One of the issues we've been discussing has been the long-term capital plan, and we're trying to work through those numbers so we can give you something that is really up to snuff. There's also, where in that capital plan, we're looking at some items that dropped out of the AgSTEM program when the number reduction was there. And so we're still working on it. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. And that's the primary thing that Facilities is looking into right now.
Thank you. Long-range planning, Alan? Anything?
You gonna skip me?
I thought we pretty much heard from, no, I'm sorry, I did skip you. All right, Michelle, you can,
We did our monthly work. It's not our annual budget
Yeah,
work.
I know.
Finance Committee met right before this meeting, and we went over the March financials. Just to let everyone know, we have 1.1% of the budget at this point remaining, which is tracking very similarly to last year. So everything for the financials, this current operating budget looks good. I also did want to just let the board know, Bob did a nice update on the 1% fund, the status of that fund. And if you include the transfer that was made this year, as well as encumbering all of the work that we moved out of the proposed operating budget and the work that has been approved for this year, we have a remaining balance of $760,546 dollars. I said 760,000 and change. That's just that remaining. So we talked about how we want to remember that this money is there as we're looking at things that got moved out of the AgSTEM project and looking at the long-term capital needs of this building, because we might be able to tackle a few of the things on that list without having to bond them. So just to know that that money is available for capital projects. The other thing we talked about was meeting with Barry who, I forget his last name, begins with a B, right? What? Bernabe. Barry Bernabe, who has worked with us in the past on securing bans and bonds. We're going to schedule to meet with him sometime in May to look at our options, review interest rates, current going rates, and such to prepare for next year. So that's most of what we talked about.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, long-range planning, Alan. Drum roll.
We haven't met. Nothing to report?
Negotiations, Greg?
We are about to commence negotiations with the union representing our custodians and cafeteria workers, and our clerical and paraprofessionals.
Thank you. And policies and bylaws, Michelle.
We continue to meet, and we have several policies on tonight's agenda.
Okay, thank you, which we'll get to shortly. All right, moving on to new business and updates. AgSTEM, Bob, you want to walk us through a current set of financials?
Yeah, in your packet is a report on page 2. The remaining is $1,015,072 from the authorized amounts. It does not reflect $72,000 approximately that were approved tonight at the building committee meeting. Those bills came in very late on Friday, and it didn't make it into this report, so it would reduce this by $72,000. But it's tracking, all the contracts are tracking, and the building committee took action on those bills, and it'll be reflected the next time.
Thank you. Any questions for Bob on the financials? All right, Greg, where is the program?
Well, if I could just address the financials for 1 second longer. I think that the number of what's balance authorized amount remaining is a vestigial number, and we should ignore it. The reason why is you've authorized $32,871,900 and some odd dollars. In addition, the state has combined the fixtures and equipment grant in with the grant they're going to fund for us, so that adds another $1.5 million to the number that's coming out. at the end. So the numbers are actually higher, but I wouldn't focus on that. What I'd focus on spending to, or authorized expenditures to date is $1,029,735 plus the $72,559 we authorized tonight, and then we're about, I believe we also authorized another $16,500 for a company vis-a-vis doing some auditing. I'm going to get this wrong. They're doing work to make sure that we comply with several acoustic regulations that have come in, standards and things that we have to do, so that we're probably just over $1.1 million now in the project. But we have now finished the design development phase. Part of this money was to finish the last payment to Castle Booze Associates for the design development phase. We're in the construction documents phase now. We will be going to the state with design development drawings, and we will be moving on to construction documents. We have, in addition, I think, come up with what we need to spend for temporary space. We don't know what we need to spend yet, but what we do need, we know what we need to do. That's being estimated, and I hope to have a report at the next meeting of where the number is for temporary arrangements for the building in the interim while the construction project is ongoing. We discussed the Phase 1 and Phase 2 site assessment that we will be doing on the property, and we have not authorized a contractor yet on that. We're still working on that. And more or less, we are moving to the next phase. You're going to be getting, hopefully by the next meeting, I hope, a different financial reporting presentation that's going to be done by Castle Booze, and this is not Castle Booze, by O&G, and this is going to be a bit more detailed, but it's also going to be in the format that you're going to see throughout the construction project. We've asked them to take our existing numbers and plug them into that, even though they normally don't do that until we actually are in the construction phase. They're going to do that now so you can get used to the format that's being recorded. We also discussed on the plan, we also discussed one significant issue, which is that the electric service to the building has got to be replaced. We have had a lot of problems with the electric service, a lot of outages and difficulties in shorts and whatnot, in part because the electric service has reached the end of its useful life, and in part because it's running through an area of woods that has not been maintained by the power company. And as a result, we've got a lot of trees and whatnot in there. So they're going to reroute the power into the school a different way, and we expect that Eversource is going to pay to reroute that line and to pay for the new transformer that they're going to bring in from the road. What we're going to have to pay for is the excavation and the laying of conduit. And it's going to come in a different area of the school, and this is going to require us to be able to accommodate it where it comes in. So we'll have more details on that as it goes, but this is something that's got to be done at this time for the project. So that's more or less what's going on in the area of the building committee. Michelle?
Remind me again, when it goes out to bid, when we expect the project to go out to bid for builders.
I'm expecting that it'll go out to bid sometime around May, June, and that point of time, with the hope that we will be starting as soon as school is over. We will be starting demolition and some environmental remediation of whatever we find when we demo certain areas of the building, especially by the science labs. And but we will be hopefully in a position to award bids by July on the school, on the principal construction, and be able to commence construction probably by the end of the summer, or September, sometime in that period of time. We're still looking at a delivery date of the fall of 2019. Nothing's changed on that yet, and so it still looks good for that. So,
Great, thank you.
sure. Anyone else?
Greg, when you referenced what O&G is going to be doing, you said the financials, but does that also include a schedule view?
Yeah, there'll be a schedule as part of it. I mean, I think they'll update the schedule when the schedule's updated. I think as we go through the project, they'll probably update it more frequently as they get more and better information. Right now, the schedule hasn't changed since the last one you've seen. So it's pretty much the same schedule. And, I mean, I don't know whether there's any tiny little deflection point, but we're in reasonably good shape on that schedule. Nothing is really slid at this point. So yeah, that'll be presented. Normally, when they present these materials, which they would be presenting to us at all of our building committee meetings, this would be a report. I've seen one of the reports they did for another school district, and it's about a 70-odd page report. It has everything, including change orders, copies of everything that was done. It's a pretty thorough report on where we are, and so you're going to get those regularly. The primary thing, though, the executive summary are the dollars in front of it and where we stand on the work completion and whether the schedule has changed as a result of it. Those are the real big takeaways. Then you can drill down and look at all kinds of information if you want to on how this works. It's a very professional report. I've seen it. It's going to be a lot easy to understand. It'll be easier when you get that before these board meetings to see what's going on.
Yeah. I would suspect that the board is most interested in tier 1 kind of schedule, major milestones. All the detail behind it is perhaps of interest, but if the lights are green down the track, then there's no reason to get into it unless you really have an insatiable appetite for detail.
No, I have no desire to make a presentation of that report other than to highlight the
big-
lights on the track,
the big milestones, right?
big milestones and the lights.
And
on the track.
whether or not we're on budget, et cetera, right? That's really where we're going.
Yeah, actually, their budget will be done relatively. We're going to have a budget based on design development drawings relatively soon. Now, that will be a check as to where we are. The final budget comes once they bid the job, and then they know how much they can build it for, and they know what their guaranteed price to us is. And so that's
Okay.
that we'll have, but we'll get a good sense of that with the design development budget as to whether we're still on track.
Thank you. Any further questions for Greg? Okay, thank you, Greg. Thank you, Bob. Let's move to policies. What? Go ahead.
We have, Castle Booze has provided us with several boards, 2 boards actually, one which shows the plans for the school and one which shows some renderings and talks a little bit about it. Those are going to be placed in all 3 town halls and will be placed in the 4 schools.
Thank you. Michelle, you didn't ask about roof lines.
I already talked to you.
Well,
Preliminary.
your complaint has been registered.
Been registered. Yes.
All right, policies. Let's start with the second reading of policy 6146, graduation requirements.
Yes, this is a second reading, and if you turn to page 4, you'll see the additional language. It is about the Connecticut Seal of Biliteracy. This is something that the state, an opportunity that the state provided that our administration chose that they would like to participate in. It would be for this graduating class, and it would be an indication on their diploma that they have met a level of proficiency in a second language. And there were no additions or requests for changes from the first reading.
Excuse me, is that an indication on their diploma or on their school record? You said diploma.
Yes, it's on their diploma. Right? Sorry. That's okay. Are there any questions?
I move that policy 6146 be approved for second reading.
Is there a second? Peter, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? All those abstain. The motion passes. John, okay, thank you. For the record, John is a yes vote. So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Second item is a first reading of enrollment for children of non-resident certified staff, certified and non-certified staff.
This policy is on our agenda tonight because we were also going to be talking about the non-resident attendance, and we just wanted to keep the policies in alignment. So if you look at 5118.2, this is the enrollment of children of non-resident certified and non-certified staff. The highlighted, what is highlighted is what is being proposed, additional language. The first sentence is just a clarification on what certified and non-certified staff.
I'm sorry, I have one of those things where there's no highlighting except for the item number, and maybe it's just because that's on my phone. Does anybody else see the highlighting on that?
Take mine.
Yeah, I don't have the highlighting either, but, no.
I just gave them mine.
Yeah, well, that's the second one. The first part that's highlighted is the last sentence of the introductory paragraph. The second part that is highlighted is under number 3, tuition, third sentence. Students will not be allowed to begin or continue in the Region 12 public schools if their tuition or fees are not paid in full on or before August 1st of each year. And this is at the request of central office, just because the collection of tuition has taken up a lot of time, and we've moved the date. It used to be the start of school, and we've moved that date to August 1st to give the central office time to communicate with the families and make sure that tuition is resolved well before students start the school year. Alan?
I hate to do this now because I must have missed the policy meeting where we covered this. But we've gotten 2 letters today. This is obviously a precursor to the other one, non-resident tuition, but we have to cover it now because you do want to keep them in sync. And the fact that this has been added or proposed to be added because of the hardship on the central office managing payments, we've gotten 2 letters today from citizens where it's actually going to impose a hardship on them to be able to make a full year's payment by August 1st of each year. So I'm wondering whether we should open this up for discussion and perhaps strike this language and revert to how we did it, having 2 different payments, because although it's might be difficult as far as a labor thing for the central office staff, clearly from what I understand from at least 2 parents, it's really a hardship financially to have to come up with that money in one payment at one time during the summer.
I wish I had actually looked carefully at the numbers. I wish we were doing this in the reverse order and that we were doing the non-resident first. It's not, the 5% of the tuition is a pretty reasonable amount for the staff to pay up front.
Right.
So,
But you said you wanted to keep it consistent. If we're not, if we
right,
don't have to
we
keep
wanna
it
be
consistent, then
consistent.
we don't have to.
so I guess, why don't we talk about the payment portion now, and then we'll get into the non-resident attendance, so that we can
Well, why don't we just
flush that.
skip ahead and do 5183
We could do that. Well, procedurally, can we do that?
Still an agenda item, I don't.
I mean, they're one's right after the other, and they're here together. Okay, so, yeah. You want to wait?
Go ahead.
All right, so we're going to move the discussion, I guess, to 5118.3 non-resident attendance, which was the original policy that started this conversation. Did you want to?
Can I have
open
this?
Yep.
I can't find it on my machine. All right, so the chairman had asked me to chair a committee to look at this policy specifically, and perhaps some others that are coming down the pipe, but we formed a committee. Michelle was on it, Julie was on it. We met with some administrators and our attorney more than once. This is what we've come up with. The administration has some significant issues, has had some issues. As I understand it, prior to this policy was previously in in existence, and we've been asked to look at it because there've been some problems with it and suggest modifications to it. Prior to this policy, when out-of-district students came to our school, it was a district-to-district agreement, and that therefore, if there were disagreements or problems came up, we dealt with the other district. By this policy, it's our district dealing with private parents, and it can be a very difficult and very tricky thing. Most of them, I think, are fine. They don't have any issues. But when the issues come up, they can be very difficult, and we've had a couple of difficult issues. I can tell you that our Director of Pupil Personnel Services is extremely concerned about this policy. The ramifications for potential special education costs, once a student is in our school that we've accepted from a private parent. Again, if it had been from district to district, there's no question that if special education costs arose after the child got here, it would be that the burden would be on the sending district. That's not clear at all. This is an unusual policy. Our attorney advised us that this is, I don't know if he's ever seen one or it's very rare, and there's significant questions as to who those costs would be borne by. The advice that we got is it would likely be borne by us. So if a student came here and was afterwards designated as a special education student and had significant needs, now, we would be responsible for that. I think the policy does address that these things don't include special education costs, but there are issues here. So the committee looked at this, and this is what we've come up with. I'm aware of the letters that we did suggest that the payments be made in advance, and perhaps Dr. Cosentino or Bob can speak to what the concern is. It's more than just labor. It's collecting the money. Once the people are in the door, you can't get them out, and we have to be paid. We have a fiduciary responsibility, in my estimation, to our taxpayers, and I appreciate the fact that it may be a burden to these parents, but we have a responsibility to our taxpayers of our region, and this is the only way that we can ensure that we're paid, is by getting paid in advance, because once the students are here, we've had at least one case where we're still chasing people for money. So that's the genesis of us looking at this. Superintendent may wish to speak to it as to concerns that led to the revisions. That's what I have to say.
Jim, first of all, thank you for doing this. This is not a simple task, not a simple, it's just simple, not a simple issue. And we've all come to discover that, particularly in the last school year. So Pat, would you like?
I'm glad Jim just added, it really, although it is a clerical burden for us at central office, the issue is really more the fact that once students are in your school, you become their stay put. And stay put is a legal term, so that if there is a discrepancy, whether it's financial or a special education issue, those parents have a right for those students to stay put in your district until that is solved. And that can take years. We currently have a family that has not finished paying their tuition. You know, they don't take phone calls. So it gets to be very, very difficult. And so I think, for the most part, the families who have come to us, they're lovely. They are absolutely lovely families. You know, the kids are great. They're part of our community. The parents are involved. And that's what the whole genesis of this policy was, to bring in families to see how wonderful Region 12 is. But I think Jim makes a very good point. We are financially responsible to our taxpayers, and you know, we have a very modest tuition, and if parents want their students to come here, I think it's important that they pay the tuition by August 1st. I will tell you that Bob's office is working on getting us to be able to accept credit cards, so that this way people can do that. And so that's where I stand, but I was just one member of the committee, and I think it was made very clear by our attorney that he certainly agreed that no one should come in unless they were paid in full.
Questions? Ellen, you had your hand up first, sir.
Well, it just seems as if, I mean, there's, the holes in here are still, unfortunately cause a hardship for people who want to have their children in the system, who have had their children in the system, and who have to come up with $10,000 to $12,000 before the school year starts. If we're doing this on the basis of one family who isn't paying, versus the fact that we already have two families that have written letters saying it's a hardship, well, then I guess the case is closed. It's 2-1. And it seems like this one family is the same family that we've had other issues with. It's not? Different family? So that other family has paid up?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the different families. I'm just going to say to you it's not the same thing.
All right. Anyway, as I said, first of all, it's 2-1, so that logic is kind of moot. And then on top of that, if we're stay put, then any family that's here for the 2017-2018 year, if they don't pay up by August of 2018 for the 2018-2019 year, we can't throw them out either. So basically, we're just causing a hardship for people for a situation that, A, isn't posing that much of a difficulty, and if it really does exist, they can stay for 4 or 5 years without paying anyway, apparently.
Can I just make a clarifying statement? Our policy is a one-year policy. So every year at this time, we let the parents know that the policy is 1 year. They have to reapply with a letter to the superintendent's office. At that point, we check with the administration of each school to make sure that the kids are well adjusted and doing well, and we would like them to continue. And if they're not, we can say, you know, it was a one-year deal, and you know, we're not going to accept you the following year. So
So somehow that's enforceable, but this other part isn't.
I don't know how to answer that. I'm just going
no,
to, yeah, I'm, you know, I am, it was a committee decision. It's a board's policy. I think the Region 12 board is very generous to allow parents to come here at such a reduced rate. But I think the board also needs to be fiscally responsible and make sure that people are paying what they're supposed to pay.
Julie?
Yeah, I served on the committee, and I think, as you can see from the fact that almost the entire policy is highlighted in yellow, that we did make significant improvements to button up a lot of the issues that left us in a liable situation. However, I do agree, and I expressed this at the committee level but was outvoted. I agree with Alan that I think having two payments is very reasonable. I know a lot of schools do take monthly payments, which of course we're not going to do, but $178,000 is what we're bringing in. Most of the families who are expressing in hardship have multiple students already enrolled. Most of those families are from New Milford. Many of those families are talking about staying on and participating in the AgSTEM program. So I just think that it's fair enough to do two payments, and I would suggest an amendment to the policy to reflect that. And if you read the following line, it says that they would be subject to immediate disenrollment if their tuition is not paid. And I would just suggest half August 1st and half January 1st, and then we can still disenroll them if it's not paid at those dates.
John? Hold on, Jim. Actually, I'm going to ask John if you can hold for a second, because I think, Jim, your follow-up.
I was just going to ask either Pat or Bob if they agree with that, that if the person misses the second payment, let's say, that you can disenroll them in January. Do you agree with that?
It seems to go counter to the state.
No, we can't. We have a child right now. I mean, no, we cannot remove the child. It would cause a lot of angst at this point. But that family is going to get notice that says at the end of this school year that this is how much you owe, and if you do not pay that, plus the tuition due on August 1st, your child will not be enrolled in our school. And it seems that our lawyer, our attorney, has agreed with that. But it's very difficult to remove students in the middle of the school year because of this stay put law.
Is it also fair to say that and I don't want to speak for Julie, but that these agreements are allowing for semi-annual payments or for monthly payments, those are district-to-district agreements. The districts are paying the tuition, not between parents and the district? Is that?
No, I think, and you can certainly correct me, I read the letters also. You know, if you go to, Catholic schools, a lot of times, or private schools, they do have payment plans. But they also, because they're private schools, they can remove kids. They don't fall under the same statutes that we do as public schools. It's apples and oranges. It just is.
So, is it fair then to summarize that that within a school year, regardless of what we say, regardless of what somebody signs or agrees to, that within that school year, we have very little, in fact, no leverage to remove a student or a family from the district? Is that?
From my experience and understanding, yes, I would say
Yeah.
that that's true.
Yeah. And is it also the case that our attorney has said that there's very little, if any, precedent around the state regarding this?
That's correct.
So
That's correct.
just want to make sure that we're all clear on what the risk profile is of doing this. I want to go back to John since I deferred him, please.
No, I'm going to have to agree with Alan and Julie. I think to jeopardize families, other than even these two families who are voicing their concern, over one or two parties that are delinquent, I think we're kind of defeating the purpose. And also, has any one of these families who are delinquent in January gone beyond August without making a payment? Or, as far as being re-enrolled?
We're only in our first year of this.
Yeah,
First year.
I understand, but has anyone ever stiffed, so to speak, the district?
Yes,
On-
currently.
Right, and there's no way to collect that money after the end of the school year?
It's, Bob, I'm looking at Bob, but John, it's in my experience, not in a district, but outside the district, is sometimes tasting bad debt costs you more money than it does to just write it off and walk away. And that's it. That's why I was putting out that this is a risk, and we could spend $20,000 on our attorney chasing somebody to collect $2,000. I don't think that would, and I know you're not suggesting that, but that's the reality of it.
What, okay, so I guess the only way, the proof is in the pudding. I guess we'll have to, if we decide to go with one payment and then people don't sign up to enroll, then I guess we'll have to reverse course.
Jen, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I'm torn with this because I completely understand the reason why this policy needs to be put in place, because we certainly don't want to put ourselves in a position where we are, maybe with a couple of families. And yet at the same time, I am concerned about the families that are here now, that all of a sudden now we're changing this policy and they're panicking. So they're already part of our community. They're already coming to school. Their family is here. And we're telling them now that they have to come up with this additional money ahead of time. And so I'm wondering, I understand it's a hardship for families who want to come into the district who aren't even here yet. And that's where I'm torn, because I want to be able to make it doable for them. But I'm actually really, really concerned about the families who are here now who don't know how they're going to be able to make this happen for August 1st. And so I don't know how to, if we can put something into place where we can at least accommodate, which I know is a catch-22 because the existing families that we have are the ones that are, as John said, stiffing us. But I I feel like I'm torn with this because we have these families that are already here, and I don't know how we can fix that, but I'm really willing to.
Julie?
Just to point out, the policy we put in place limits our liability to 1 year because it's a year-to-year policy. So if we make 2 payments, if they don't pay by August 1st, they don't get in at all. So that payment we don't lose. There's no risk because if they don't pay it by August 1st, they're not in. So the only liability would be that second payment. And if they don't make that payment, then they can't come back the next year. So it's a we've set up the policy so it is a small window of liability. And I really think it would be bad form to lose the families we've got. From what I'm hearing, I mean, one of the families is from Chippewa, one is from Burnham. For example, at Burnham, there's a big fundraiser coming up, and what I understand is those New Milford families are carrying it. They're volunteering, they're participating, they really love our community and want to be part of it. And this is a huge crush for them. And I don't even know how these families found out we were going to change the policy. But once it gets out there more broadly, I suspect we'll have many more families expressing their concerns.
Michelle?
I feel the same way as Jen does because I see both sides. I think the ability to take a credit card helps, but I'm wondering if there is sort of a modification to what Julie said with the first payment, the second payment. If we have if you can't make it the first payment all up front, if we have a credit card on file for the second payment, so that we have a hold. It's kind of like a hold on that second payment. It's kind of like setting up a payment plan where that. I don't know. We do this at our office, but where we have a credit card on file and you can set up a plan. It might be a little bit more of a guarantee for that payment. I don't know. That's maybe just an option.
John?
I also
Greg.
wonder, too. I'm sorry.
John, then Greg.
Which I'm not saying is going to be easy either, but because obviously they have to come up with the payment ahead of time anyway, but even having them pay half a year ahead of time so that they can prepare so that they're always a year ahead, a half a year ahead, so for families that, want to stay here, and I don't know how that can happen, but they can put half the year sort of in ahead of the time so they're always ahead of payment, so we're always and that they're, going to honor sort of like, I just think that maybe there's got to be something that we can do because I'm really feeling for the families, especially that are here now, that are already part of the fabric. And so I don't know how we accommodate that, but I wish that we can come up with something. So that's
Right.
all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where I come out on this. There's got to be some way that we can solve these hardship problems without losing the general rule that people should pay the tuition in advance. There may be just a third way. There may be a third way. I'm not quite sure how to do it. But it would be nice if we could figure out some way to accommodate these families. But the second point I want to make is the policy, I think, needs something in it to indicate that it's completely inapplicable to AgSTEM. I mean, I don't want someone thinking that they can make a 5,000 or a 7,000 or whatever. You can't pay to come into AgSTEM through this. AgSTEM is entirely different. They're not eligible for this. And so the people under the tuition program are not eligible for AgSTEM because that creates all kinds of state law issues and issues with the town. So I just want to make sure that gets clarified in the policy.
No, I think that's a good add to the wording of the policy. Alan?
Yeah, I think we're just getting into the weeds here, and we're taxing ourselves with trying to figure something out that really just isn't necessary because we have a program that we put in place that offered a discounted tuition so that we could help make our classes and our sports teams and our schools viable. And we knew that the amount of money that came in was going to be almost like a stipend for the school system. The important thing was the kids in the classrooms and making our regional students options and opportunities more viable. So now that this is underway, we have one family that is a problem. And because of this one family, and it's probably under $10,000, I don't know, maybe even less, this is still, we're talking a windfall. Remember, the whole argument we always had with this is, oh, the taxpayers and the cost per student. We realize, no, we're getting some money, but what we're really doing is helping children and families and helping our children and families. So the fact that we're trying to find a third way or trying to figure out how to massage this is really because we've gotten too far into the weeds, and we really have to think about what we are doing. We have to err on the side of generosity and heart, and not on the side of how are we going to get our $4,000, because it's really not going to break the bank, and it's one family versus a whole host of families who are very happily coming to our school system and finding out what a great school this is and populating our classes. And if it's hard or if it's a risk, I think that we should really take that risk, as we have, or at least have faith in this new buttoned-down, more complex document that our attorney has told us will help us fend off some risk. I really feel that if the choice is how do we deal with the families that are here or that might want to come here versus a delinquent family, we really should look into our hearts and cater to the families that are coming here and filling in our classrooms and not worry about the one single family that has brought this issue up.
Is there going to be an agreement contemplated in this policy that the family would sign, Jim? Was that? I read this, but it didn't jump out at me, so I could have easily missed it. But
There's a
Pat,
We
yes.
currently have paperwork that the family signs. We will then revise it based on some of these other pieces.
it'll take on more of a, I just want to say contract, but more of a contractual feel, that's saying that they're signing up, understand what their rights, what we believe our rights are, or conversely what their rights aren't,
Well,
right? Because I think the last one, we were a little vague on.
Right, we definitely are working on that, and our attorney will look at it, but basically what we normally do is attach the policy, okay, to what they're signing. You know, I've read the policy, I'm aware, that kind of thing.
Right.
But, you know, it's,
Like, for example, if you're dealing with, let's say, a senior, and payment is still owed, we could withhold transcripts. So if that senior was college bound, they're not going to be able to complete their applications.
you can do that.
Yeah?
No,
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
you can't withhold a diploma, you cannot withhold transcripts, you know, you have to. You know, it's, you know what I'm saying? What we're trying to do, what we always try to do from my office is protect the board, okay? So yes, you can do things until there is a legal issue brought to your, you know, to your door, and then, you know, things happen. And so that's just trying to be proactive to protect you, and that was the advice we got from our attorney.
Greg's suggestion, you know, is if you wrote the policy as it sits, which is payments due up front, if, you know, and I'm not necessarily endorsing this, but suggesting this as an idea, that, you know, is if it says in the policy that ultimately that the region reserves the right to change the payment policies, the region reserves the right to respond to somebody who's delinquent by, for example, assessing perhaps a fee on late payments and things like that, that we can exercise discretion. And if somebody walks in and says, I have a hardship, and they prove that hardship, however, then you have the right, the district has the right to decide, well, we could do split payments. The challenge with something like that is it gets subjective, and it becomes a slippery slope. And why you did it for me, but you didn't do it for them, and then this board will be hearing that, and I don't really think that's where we want to go as a body. So that's why I said I'm not endorsing it, I'm just suggesting, because that's the other side of the coin that Greg brought up. Greg, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm gonna withdraw that suggestion. Instead, I'm gonna say I'm on board with Alan and Julie and John. I think unless there is a legal reason, if the only risk is that we might not get paid the second semester, if that's the only risk and we can not admit them the following year, I mean, if you want to throw a 1.5% a month interest charge on unpaid bills or whatever, I mean, that's fine. I don't care what you do with that. But I guess what my concern is, if that's the only risk, is we're going to miss a few $1,000s in tuition. I say do it. You know, let's just get it. Let's just get it done, because I think otherwise, this is an interesting program. We should either go all in or we should just pull the plug on it. So I want to go all in.
Pete? Looked like you had something. I know your hand wasn't up, but you looked like you had something to say.
This has come before us before, and you can make a real case for helping people. I mean, and the board is very generous and has been in the past, but I don't know. I think these things come before us from time to time, and I think, Greg, you should speak to Barbara Henry. After being in her office for an hour, I don't think she would agree with you, and I don't agree with you either. I know it's great to be nice, and you're only talking about hopefully splitting a payment, but are you going to establish a policy that will split a payment every time somebody asks, or are you going to make this work only for a particular instance? What do you?
The policy as it's written is a single payment.
Right.
Greg's suggestion, as with others,
Yeah, we amend that.
is to go back to what we're doing today, which is 2 payments.
Right.
So we would amend this first reading as it sits.
Well, if it's one person, I mean, it's certainly easy to say yes, but are you going to open the door for this as a permanent solution?
This is all, in my opinion, it's a matter of managing risk. You know, and when you do something like this, there's going to come a time, as we're experiencing, where somebody's not going to make a payment, and you know, we could factor that in saying, to Alan's point, net, you know, we brought in all these kids, we made this much money back to the towns, but it cost us a few $1,000s along the way. That's a cost of doing business, as we say, right, Pete?
Right.
So that's fine, as long as you go into this with your eyes wide open. I think the larger issue on the risk of is what the attorneys are saying, is that with the stay put, we don't know what we don't know. There's no precedent in the state of Connecticut where we could say that somebody's went to court and won, that we can block them from coming in the subsequent year. So, you know, if we have a problem that starts early on in our district, we may be, you know, what do we do the next year if, even though in August they don't want to pay, but somebody says there's a stay put law and you have to enroll me? That's a bridge nobody's apparently crossed yet. Yeah. Now, let me ask this. This is an amendment to an existing policy, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right. If we don't make some of the changes that we're talking about here, and we still continue to bring students in and tuition in, we are in worse position. Is right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm okay.
Yeah, we're in a worse position. So unless we're asking ourselves the larger question, to be or not to be, do we do this or don't we do this? You know, then I think it would be in the board's best interest to tighten up this policy as much as it possibly can, because no matter what, we're in a better place today than when we were yesterday. We could always revisit it if we get smarter as we go along, but anyway, Alan.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think a lot of risk is mitigated by all the other changes in this document, which I am for, and I think not, you know, I'm not saying that we revert completely or that we don't accept this. I'm saying that that all the other changes are very valuable in terms of mitigating our risk and shoring up our criteria with which we admit students. My only issue is with the tuition aspect, which I think we should strike and leave unchanged the aspect of the fees having to be paid in 2 payments, one on or before August 1st, which is earlier, which makes sense. It used to be September 1st, or the first week of school, whatever it was. I believe we should keep August 1st, but then we should also return The second payment being due January 1st, as it stands now. So in other words, it's not a complete reversion because we're switching the date from September 1st to August 1st, but I think we should revert the two payments because it's more of a, we could stand to lose a lot more. The families that can't afford to do this, the two that we know about, the 6 or so that we don't know about, we're going to lose all of their payments as opposed to having to deal with the fact we might lose the second payment of this one particular family or even a few that show up. Because for the most part, people are happy here and are nice, and we're nice to them and they're nice to us, and everything works nicely. We've only had a couple of instances where, you know, for whatever reason, hardship, or we had an entanglement in the fall over with another family, they are exceptions. And I don't think we need to be exceptional in this. So I would say, make a motion to accept this for first reading with the fees returned to being receivable in, or payable in two, what's the word I'm looking for? Two installments, one on August 1st, on or before August 1st of each year, and one on or before January 1st of each year. And we have it.
So there's a motion, it's been seconded. Further discussion, Jen?
So I'm turning myself around. I'm still torn, but I'm listening to, and I'm changing my mind a bit because just keep thinking about how I would feel if all of a sudden I had to come up with an additional amount of money that I was planning on doing 6 months later, or 3-4 months later, or whatever. And I just feel for these families who all of a sudden, because the thing also is, the part is they don't know about this, right? So they're going to kind of get slapped in the face with, you know, I'm getting emails prior to this. What do you mean we're going to have? Well, but they didn't know, and so, you know, giving them enough time to plan accordingly is, I think, on our part, should be done. So, you know, I'd rather them not hear through the grapevine and then all of a sudden be officially told. I'm nervous about that. So I agree with Alan that I think that asking for a payment on August 1st, it makes sense. It's reasonable, so that we're knowing that we're getting payment before school starts, so that we're not putting ourselves in a position of when school starts, we're still waiting for that first payment, and then asking for the second payment in January. So I think that that's reasonable.
Michelle? Sorry. Michelle, you kind of had your hand up before, but
I did.
still have something? If not, we'll go to Jim.
Well, I think I'm torn. I'm struggling with this. I do think, though, that Alan, the wording is not exactly the way you put it, because we would need to say students will not be allowed to begin or continue in the region if their tuition or deposit, whatever we want to call it, is not paid instead of in full in half by August 1st. So we still need that portion that says, and then with the remaining, so the wording, so I get what you were trying to do.
We would say
have to
if
fix
they're not
it.
paid, if the first payment is not received on or before August 1st, and if the second payment is, you know, not received. See the
What?
Yeah, or the second payment is not received on or before January 1st.
Yeah, I mean, it would,
it's getting wordy, but that's what these things are.
right. The other thing was just the option if we wanted to consider grandfathering all of the people we already have and putting this in place for future, but yeah, and it's creating sort of like two it's a lot, but I yeah,
Jim?
it's hard.
Yeah, I just want to answer a couple of things that have been said. One was that Julie said she didn't know where the New Milford parents were getting this information from. Ms. Dwyer came to our last meeting and addressed this very subject and said, please don't do this. So obviously, she's learning this from, I assume, somebody on this board, if not more than one person, and it's been spread to the people in New Milford, which is fine. Pat said that all of the folks in New Milford know anyway. All of,
I sent a letter after the last
Okay.
meeting. I sent a letter to all the people who tuition in, letting them know that we have, there is a possibility that all tuition will be due August 1st based on a new board policy. so that they were aware.
And the other thing is, I just have to say for the record that, I appreciate the fact that we're trying to bring in families and show them what a great place it is, but that I feel that my primary responsibility on this board is to this region, and that we have a fiduciary responsibility, as I've said before, to the region. You want to err on the side of generosity, okay, but I'm not there. It's one family right now, but who knows what the future holds, and I think to open this thing up is not a good idea. Bob, do you know where we are with regard to credit cards?
I've been looking at it pending what your policy's gonna be.
Do you think that it's something that would be possible?
It's possible to do
All right.
it.
So, I mean, I will vote against the amendment. The board will do what it may. This is only the first reading. I might suggest, no matter what happens, that perhaps the board invite its attorney to the second reading, because there seems to be questions that perhaps the attorney could answer. I think it's it could be potentially a very serious issue.
No.
Stephanie?
Anthony, could you just clarify for me, you mentioned it a couple minutes ago, and I think I misunderstood it, about the legality of us being able to tell a family if they haven't paid that they are not able to attend the following school year. You're saying that, I'll let you explain.
Yeah, it's beyond just payment issues.
Right.
If under, I think, any circumstance, maybe barring a child who's physically disruptive or threatening the safety of our school, for us to ask somebody not to come back. And that's where this stay put concept came from, or comes into play. And we've asked the attorney, well, what have other districts, where's the precedent here? And there has been no precedent. Point. I mean, Alan, you're right. It doesn't apparently happen. On the flip side, there are not a lot of districts who are engaged in what we're doing. So, sort of not surprising, but it's almost like it's, for me, the worst of all situations. Not a lot of practical experience. Therefore, there's not a lot of precedent in the courts for anybody to lean on. We talked to the Department of Education in Connecticut and about this, and they had really nothing much to offer either. So we're kind of out there on this, and we won't really know in the end, if push came to shove, how much leverage we would find. We will find out when we take somebody to court. That's when we'll find out for sure.
In a worst case scenario, we could legally expose ourselves to a family that doesn't pay in their, second half of the tuition, that in essence ends up staying 2 or 3 years without paying, if we're in a legal situation.
Yeah, that's, I mean, Jim, when you talk to Gary, I mean, how far or broadly did the scenarios of the conversation get in that regard? Did we ask him for an opinion on this?
On that issue, no, we didn't have a discussion. I mean,
No, on the stay put concept, and
I could. He advises against the policy. All right, he thinks it's insane.
Well,
Okay, but he's trying to work with us, and I think that I shouldn't say that. He didn't tell me that he thought it
Yeah,
was insane.
okay.
He didn't think it was in the board's best interest. He understands what the board is trying to do and to open the families up, etc. But I really do believe that there's obviously a lot of questions. I don't know the answers to these things, and that he should be here for the second reading so that members can ask him these questions. Excuse me, questions. Maybe put it on the first item of the agenda so we can get him out of here. But I think it would be important.
And again, his opinion was based on just the absence of precedent. Is that a fair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Julie.
I think we're confusing two sort of discussion points. And Stephanie, I think what you were talking about was the liability of the second payment, and if they don't pay, are we liable? And sure, we're not going to get that second payment, but the year-to-year concept, he said, was fine. So if they don't pay in year 1, then they can't come back in year 2. The stay put thing is a whole separate thing about special ed children. and where they reside. And that's a whole nother sort of liability area. And that's where he was most concerned. And there is many schools who do staff, they allow the children of staff to come in, and they're also considered out-of-district students. So there is a lot of that going on around the state, and he did say that was very common. So there's no difference, with a staff child and what could potentially be a stay put than there is with another child coming in who's not the child of a staff person. That was my understanding.
If I may.
Yeah.
Those many instances around the state that you're speaking about, Julie, for special ed students, those are district-to-district agreements. So that if the child is a special ed or develops into a special ed student while they're here, it's the sending district's responsibility, and it's clear. It is not clear when it is an agreement between our district and private parents that if their student comes here and suffers something and has to be rushed to the emergency room and is in the psychiatric ward for a week, whose responsibility that is, or develops into a special ed student while they're here. There's no precedent for that.
Well,
it's not a sending district's responsibility. It is our responsibility.
Well, if I may, Julie just said this has to do with tuitioning in staff and teachers' children, and that is a person-to-district relationship.
That was the point I was trying to make.
That's the point.
And the state put, you believe though, Pat, is beyond special needs?
Oh, absolutely, because that was one of the issues we had this year. Family, they weren't special needs students, but they got to stay put, and we're still working with that.
Wow.
I
We
think
know how
you're
that
right.
happens.
It's about risk management. You're taking a risk. There is no precedence, and my concern is also, and this is not now, but it's just another part of the puzzle of child advocates, Office of Civil Rights, all of these agencies that get involved very quickly when a parent has a concern, and things bubble up very, very quickly. And I'm just trying to be proactive and protect you because it can happen very quickly. And if you just read the newspapers in this area, it's happening currently in a couple of local districts nearby. It's just, it's unknown territory, and I just think you should need to be careful. That's all.
We're discussing, again, so we have a motion on the floor to amend, or the first reading and amending an existing policy. I suggest we focus on that since that was what's on the agenda. The larger question of do we continue to tuition in or not is something that if the board wants to pursue it, then we should put it on the agenda as its own, as a separate item, because that's not the motion right now. You don't pass this first reading, we go back to the policy we had yesterday, which is wide open and far more, yeah, thank you. That was another word I was thinking of, but I didn't want to use it. Which is worse than what we have today. So the motion on the floor is to pass the first reading with the changes that Alan suggested, and I'm going to throw in on top of that the one Greg suggested to make sure the tuition in policy does not apply to Ag STEM. I think that should be black and white in that as well. So that's the motion on the floor. And what? Try to repeat what he said?
I wrote it down.
Okay.
Just as long as everyone understands that that's part of this first reading. Okay.
As a first reading. So Michelle?
To sort of echo what Anthony is saying, I know we're getting hung up on the payment portion, and I completely understand that, but the rest of the policy is a vast improvement on our original policy, and our lawyer wrote this policy. Very rarely do we do it this way, and then we went back and just made a few little edits to personalize it to our district, which we then passed through him to make sure everything was tight. So the whole question about being able to come back the second year, he's put in the strongest language he can to protect the district about the contract, the signing of the second year. So this is the strongest language he can come up with to protect the district at the moment regarding that second year. And then after that, it's until it's tested in the courts. So, and then on, I guess, my comment on the payment portion is that I even though I understand the position of the administration, I would support the amendment partially because the August 1st is such an improvement. We have the option, we have the ability to not allow any students to start if they haven't paid the first payment. So that's a vast improvement already. So for that, I would support this, and I would suggest that the board evaluate again. Each year we need to keep our eyes on this policy and look at the ins and outs to just make sure that we're protecting the region as well.
Peter. We were just about to vote, but now if you're going to move to question, now we have a motion on that. So would you consider withdrawing that? Did you withdraw? Thank you. Okay. All those in favor of policy 5118.3, non-resident attendance with the amendment suggested by Alan and also by Greg, and endorsed being accepted for a first reading. Thank you. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Pete, your hand was up. Peter? You're going with the group. The group appreciates that. All those opposed? I did? In favor? Nine and one opposed. The motion passes. Thank you. There's no further items.
No. We got to go back to the other one.
Oh, I was trying to get out before we flipped the tape. All right. We got 3 minutes, so we have a test. 3 minutes. Graduation requirements, if it's simple.
No. 5118.2, the staff.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
We just.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, Michelle. 3 minutes.
And the motion was on, we already have a motion on the table. The only thing I would just suggest is that we leave this one paid in full on or before August 1st because it is such a small amount.
So I don't
It's
mind the
just-
inconsistency if you don't.
Yeah.
All right.
Because it'll
And
make
then-
it easier for the central office to at least have those payments done.
How are we handling the point Greg brings up? This doesn't apply to AgStim either. Does a teacher's child get admitted to AgStim as a Chippewa student and therefore at 5%? Or do they get admitted as catchment from whatever district the teacher's in and blah, 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 blah? Have we thought about that?
That's a good question.
I would say on that one, they've got to come from a sending town, and the sending district's got to approve it. And I would say this is as well.
That's
That's
interesting.
an
though,
interesting
Because they'd
question.
have to apply. What if they've been a Region 12 student since kindergarten?
Why don't we leave that aside
Yeah.
and
Can
come
we
back
put
to
that-
it?
Back to that.
But I do think
Yeah,
it
ask
needs.
about it,
I do think
absolutely.
we need to figure that out.
Accept this for first reading, but
As is.
we have to go back to policy and talk about the AgStim.
Yes, I guess I will add, because Teresa and I were speaking about this. No, that's too much. Okay,
All right.
it's just that there are several other.
Did we stop? Do we really have to stop?
Stop interrupting me. We have several other classes of students, so we're gonna have more policies.
Okay.
It's not your call.
All right. We need a motion.
You wasted more.
Did you make the motion, Ellen?
We had it already.
We had it already.
Okay. And somebody second it?
Oh, somebody make the bloody motion and
Do it again,
second
then.
it.
Move
so
to
we go
accept
at it.
5118.2 for first reading.
Second? Thank you. And any further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? All those opposed?
Yeah. All right. Move to adjourn.
Abstain. Hang on. We got to get the vote.
we're running out of.
Pete, what did you vote? Yay or nay? Thank you. Okay, the motion passes. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor? Sorry,
Aye.
we're adjourned.